I'm stuck on a road that has no end. I hate driving. The only reason why I bought a car was in order to get to places more conveniently without having to wait for buses. If you ask me what car I drive, I can't even tell you more than what colour it is. I had just left from my parents' home and I had a 2-hour-long car drive ahead of me. It was dark already and the highway was surprisingly crowded at the pay toll. And so, I checked my GPS for another route. It led me to an old road that I never took before, and it looked like I could cut 20 minutes. And so, I decided to take it. The road itself seemed well maintained, but the problem was there was no lights anywhere. Even with my high beams, I could barely see through the devouring darkness ahead of me. I slowed down, unsure if there were any upcoming curves or animals that could jump out in front of the car. About 10 minutes into my drive, I saw a person on the side of the road. He was holding out his thumb, trying to hitch a ride. I really didn't want to let strangers inside my car, especially in an isolated place like this one. So, I ignored him and moved on. I wondered what the guy was doing in the middle of nowhere, hitchhiking, but I shrugged it off and continued. 10 minutes after that, I saw another person on the side of the road with his thumb out. As I passed by, I realized it was the same person. His face and clothes were dirty, but it was undoubtedly the same person. Had I somehow gone back? I had been driving forward this whole time, and there were no turns or curves anywhere. I checked my GPS. I seemed to be on the right track. 74 kilometers remaining. Suspicious, but convinced there was a logical explanation, I continued. 10 minutes later, there he was again. Same person, and yet different. His forehead was bloody, and his clothes ripped in places. I looked at him holding his thumb out and sped my car up. At this point, I started to panic a little. I turned on my GPS again, and it showed I still had 90 kilometers ahead of me until the next turn. What the hell? Another person on the road. The same person again. Bloodier than last time. Arm, which he held out visibly, fractured, with a bone sticking out. I looked away from him and continued driving. I looked at the GPS and it showed that I had 105 kilometers in front of me. What's going on here, damn it? I inhaled and exhaled deeply, telling myself there should be a gas station or some fucking thing nearby. The road can't stretch on forever, right? 10 minutes had passed since running into the person on the road, and there he was again. He was bloody all over, and his clothes were ripped in various places. He had a huge scar on his forehead, and blood was running down his face. I ignored him once more, feeling his gaze on the back of my head as I passed by. I looked at the GPS, 187 kilometers until I reached my destination. Fuck! I turned on the radio to have something to keep me company from this deafening silence, and I found a talk show. It put my mind at ease for a little bit. It made me feel like I was not completely alone. The person on the radio talked about the news, and I tried to listen to him, focusing on the road and hoping against hope I would not run into that guy again. Now, if we move on to the sports news, our boys scored. An amazing... The voice stopped for a brief moment, which made me think the radio cut out, but then it continued. Don't look behind! I stared at the road, but squinted my eyes, trying to figure out if I had just imagined that. Do not look behind. Whatever you do, don't look behind. My blood froze, and I suddenly got a very strong urge to look in the rearview mirror. I resisted for a few seconds and then fell into the trap and looked. The person who was hitchhiking was on my back seat, bloodier than ever, staring at me. I screamed and swerved off the road, falling into a ditch to stop my car completely, forcing me to slam my head onto the steering wheel. It took me a moment to regain my senses, and when I did, I jerked my head towards the back seat. It was empty. I dragged myself out of my car, assessing the damage. There was no way I could get out of the ditch. I looked around, having a sudden feeling of unease, and then pulled out my cell phone to call for help. But no matter what number I called, the line was dead. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I went back to the road on foot and started walking. A few minutes into my hike, I saw headlights coming from behind me. I put my thumb out to hitch a ride, but the car just drove past me. I continued walking, and some time later, another set of headlights appeared in the distance. I raised my thumb again, but the car didn't slow down. As it drove past me, a shocking realization hit me like a ton of bricks. It was the same car from before. It's been an hour, and the same car keeps passing by. Why, I'm never going camping again. Michael, James and I had been friends since elementary school. We'd always find time to hang out, despite the increasingly busy schedule and discovery of the opposite sex. We had been particularly busy with work lately, and hung out less and less often, so Michael suggested we go camping for the weekend. James and I agreed without even giving it a second thought. We loved camping, and this was a good opportunity to get drunk together again without interruptions. I picked them up on a Friday afternoon, and when I asked Michael where we were going to camp, he said that it was the same place his granddad used to camp in, and that it was highly secluded, and no one would be bothering us. It took us a few hours to get there, but when we did, we took our stuff and followed Michael deeper into the woods. We walked for about an hour, and it had started to get dark. James and I were a little bit agitated, having to walk for so long to Michael's special spot. But just as we were about to tell him that this was as good a spot as any, he told us, "We're here." It was a big clearing, giving us a lot of visibility and room to set up our tents. After unpacking, we cooked some food and drank beer, reminiscing of the old days and exchanging news. James talked about how he wanted to become a police officer, and we ridiculed him a little bit for kicks. But after we had our laughs telling him he'll need to arrest himself first for everything he's done in the past, we expressed our support for him. Michael shrugged, not knowing what he wanted in life. Right now he was happy with a 9-to-5 job and just didn't care about anything more than stability. They were about to ask me about my plans when we heard a high-pitched scream echo in the distance. We instinctively turned our heads in the direction of the sound, but saw nothing. I asked Michael, who was more experienced camper than I was, but he said he didn't really know. We brainstormed what kind of animal it could be, but after a while, just let it go. We continued talking for a while around the campfire, getting ready to call it a day. Just then, I saw movement in the trees with my peripheral vision. I thought it must have been my imagination, because when I turned my head, there I saw only rows of trees. I shrugged it off and continued to listen to James's story. Both he and Michael seemed to not notice anything. A few minutes went by, and I had a nagging feeling, something I just couldn't shake away. I looked at a row of trees to my right again, and still there was nothing. Still, looking there made me feel uneasy. I started to ignore my gut, dismissing it as my own paranoia. Not 5 minutes go by, and the feeling of dread only intensified. I looked to my right again and stopped, in bafflement. A few feet in front of the row of trees stood a lone, very thin tree, separated from the rest of the clearing. I squinted my eyes, trying to figure if my brain was playing tricks on me from the excessive beer consumption. Was that a tree there all along? Wait. Holy shit. That's not a tree. It just moved slightly. I blinked and continued staring, transfixed at whatever stood there. The longer I stared, the more apparent it became that it was no tree I was looking at. It was someone, or rather, something. Something too thin to be human, and too tall to be an animal. I grabbed Michael's attention, and when he looked at the figure, he went pale instantly. He silently muttered, "Oh shit," to himself. "Don't look at it," he said. "Guys, listen to me. Don't look at it. If it comes near us, don't acknowledge it. Don't talk to it. Just keep your eyes on each other. Got it?" To say I was scared shitless is an understatement. "Michael, "What the hell is that?" I asked. "Quiet! Just look at me, and don't move your eyes away, alright?" he said with a trembling voice. I looked over to James, who was silently staring at the campfire. Everything was quiet. In fact, it was too quiet. I only realised it just now. No sounds came at all, save for the crackling of the fire. We stared like that in silence for what felt like ages, when suddenly another sound appeared in the distance. A branch cracked, as if someone had stepped on it. From there we heard the thuds of the very slow footsteps, followed by the rustling of the leaves on the ground, coming from our right side. In seconds, I saw something emerge from the corner of my eye, but I couldn't make out what it was. Michael motioned with his index finger for us to look at him, and so we did. The figure slowly stepped behind Michael, and I could see with my limited line of sight that the creature was extremely thin. Not even fit for the word emaciated. It looked like a real-life stick figure. It was tall, easily towering over Michael, and probably even more than I anticipated. But I wouldn't dare look up. It looked like its body had been made from the roots and branches, and slowly the creature bent down with a creaking noise and put its head to Michael's. I felt its penetrating gaze on me, but I stared right into Michael's eyes. It was tearing up by this point. I could see the creature smiling with the peripheral vision, and it was almost irresistible to glance at the creature just for a second, but I managed not to do it. The figure stood up, creaking equally, and stayed behind Michael for a few seconds, completely still, before it turned around and went the other way around. It was coming in my direction, and I felt like I was about to piss my pants. It came behind me. I heard its footsteps stop. Then the creaking sound followed, and I knew it was bending down. I closed my eyes and breathed out quietly, trembling like a leaf on the wind. And then, all of a sudden, I heard a frantic set of footsteps to my left. I opened my eyes and glanced to the left, seeing James running away. There was a high-pitched scream behind me. Then the creature ran after James, its footsteps impossibly quick. "On me!" Michael reminded me during the commotion. I looked back at him and listened as the creature caught up to James, who managed to let out a short scream before he was silenced. What ensued was the sound of loud screeching, bashing, slamming, and mauling to my left, while Michael and I stared at each other. It lasted for a whole minute before it abated, and the blood-curdling screaming stopped completely. Silence once again filled the air around us, and I heard the slow and soft footsteps to my left. They gradually faded and then completely disappeared. Michael and I continued glaring at each other, too paralysed with fear to avert our gaze. Only when we started to hear the wildlife in the forest again, Michael suggested we get the fuck out of there. He told me not to look to my left, not because I might see James's body, but because he didn't want to risk the creature still being around. We left all of our shit in camp and bolted out of there. The creature left in the opposite direction, and so we hoped we wouldn't run into it. But we didn't care about ignoring it at this point. We heard a loud shriek in the distance, which indicated the monster was far away from us, which put us at ease momentarily. Still, though, that scream was enough to freeze the marrow of the bone. We reached the car much faster than we got to the campsite, and once we got in, I clumsily pulled out my keys, almost dropping them onto the floor while trying to put them in the ignition. We drove out of there with a cloud of dust behind us, both of us shaking. "Michael, what the fuck was that thing?" I asked while going as fast as the road would allow me to. I don't know," he muttered, still pale. My grandfather, he told me about it a few times, but I thought they were just stories. He said that the creature can only hurt you if you let it know you see it." "Poor James," I said, glancing in the rear-view mirror every few seconds, half expecting that thing to appear in the reflection. luckily, it never did, and Michael and I made it out safely. We went straight to the police and reported the whole thing to their skepticism. I can't blame them. A couple of drunk guys barge in the middle of the night, telling them about a fucking stick figure that killed their friend in the woods. After some convincing, they decided to send a patrol to the spot. An investigation was started when the police quickly found James's body. They said he had been mauled so badly they couldn't identify him. They concluded it was a bear attack, dismissing our story of the stick figure, threatening that we weren't suspects right now, but that it could change very quickly. And so, Michael and I dropped it. I don't go camping anymore, and if you do, make sure you know where you are going. Or else you might end up like James, or worse.